It all started 3 months after I moved into my new house. The neighborhood looked perfect at first. Clean streets, quiet environment, nice houses. But there was one thing I didn't really pay attention to when I bought the house. The HOA, for those who don't know, the Homeowners Association basically controls a lot of rules in the neighborhood. Things like how your lawn looks, where you park, what color your house can be, even what decorations you can put outside. At first, I thought it wouldn't be a big deal. I was wrong. About 2 weeks after moving in, I got my first letter. From the HOA, it said my trash bin was visible from the street and that it violated community standards. The fine was $50. Now I thought it was a little ridiculous, but fine. I moved the bin behind my fence. Problem solved, or so I thought. A week later, another letter arrived. This time it said my grass was slightly longer than the community standard height. The fine? Ondru. At this point I started getting annoyed. My grass looked exactly like everyone else's. But instead of arguing, I mowed it immediately. Again, problem solved, except it wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got the most ridiculous letter yet. Apparently, my car was parked in my driveway in a way that was too close to the sidewalk. Yes, my own driveway. The HOA claimed it violated parking guidelines and fined me $500. That's when I decided I had enough. If the HOA wanted to follow rules so strictly, then I was going to follow every single rule in the HOA handbook. Every single one. So I downloaded the full HOA rulebook. It was 78 pages long, and that's when I discovered something interesting. Most of the people on the HOA board, including the president, were breaking multiple rules themselves. For example, the HOA handbook clearly stated that trash bins must never be visible from the street. Guess whose trash bins were sitting right next to the curb every week? The HOA president. Another rule said that no lawn decorations taller than 2 feet were allowed. Guess who had a 5-foot decorative fountain in their front yard? The vice president of the HOA. That's when I had an idea. If they were going to fine me for tiny things, then I was going to report every violation in the neighborhood. So the next weekend, I took a walk around the neighborhood. But this wasn't a normal walk. I had the HOA rulebook open on my phone, and I started documenting everything. Overgrown grass, trash bins, illegal decorations, cars parked on the street overnight. By the time I finished, I documented 27 violations. And guess what? Most of them belonged to HOA board members. So I emailed the entire list to the HOA office, along with photos, and I quoted the exact rules they were breaking. 3 days later, the HOA president knocked on my door, and he did not look happy. 3 days later, the HOA president knocked on my door. He was standing there with a serious look on his face, holding a folder in his hand. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. He looked annoyed, but also a little nervous. "I received your email," he said. Now the thing about my email was that it wasn't just a complaint. I had attached 27 different violations with pictures and exact rule numbers from the HOA handbook, and most of those violations belonged to HOA board members themselves. The president cleared his throat. "You can't just go around reporting everyone like this," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" I asked. "You reported me, the vice president, and 3 other board members." I nodded. "Well, the rules say every violation should be reported." For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he tried a different approach. "Look, we can probably work something out." That sentence immediately told me something. They weren't used to someone actually reading the rulebook. "You fined me $500 for parking in my own driveway," I reminded him. "That's different," he said quickly. "How?" He didn't have a good answer. Instead, he told me the HOA board would be discussing the situation in the next meeting. Now here's the interesting part. HOA meetings are technically open to homeowners, so I decided to attend. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening. When I walked into the community clubhouse, almost every HOA board member was already there. And judging by the looks they gave me, they were not happy. The president started the meeting and immediately brought up my email. "This homeowner has filed multiple violation reports against members of the board," he said. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. One board member shook his head. "This is harassment," he said. I almost laughed. Harassment? They had been sending me fines for weeks, but now suddenly they had a problem with the rules being applied to them. Then the vice president spoke. "We should dismiss these reports," she said. "They're clearly retaliatory." But that's when something unexpected happened. One of the regular homeowners in the room raised his hand. "Actually, I checked the rulebook after reading the email," he said. "And he's right." Suddenly the room got quiet. The homeowner continued. The rules say violations must be enforced equally for all residents, including board members. A few other neighbors started nodding, and just like that, the HOA board realized something. This situation was no longer private. Now the entire neighborhood was paying attention. The president tried to regain control of the meeting. "All right," he said. "We'll review the reports and decide how to proceed." But as the meeting ended and people started leaving, I overheard two neighbors talking. One of them said something that made me smile. Maybe someone should finally audit the HOA. And that's when I realized something. If the neighbors started looking closely at the HOA, they might discover something much bigger than a few rule violations. Something that could completely destroy the HOA board. And the next morning, I received an email from one of my neighbors with a subject line that made my jaw drop. It said, "You need to see this. The HOA might be hiding something." And when I opened the attachment, I realized the HOA board had made a mistake far worse than fining me. But what I discovered next could get them removed from power entirely. The next morning, I opened the email my neighbor had sent me. The subject line still echoed in my head. "You need to see this. The HOA might be hiding something." Attached to the email was a PDF file. At first, I thought it was just another copy of the HOA rules or maybe meeting notes. But when I opened it, I realized it was something completely different. It was a financial report, specifically the HOA's annual budget report. Now, I'm not an accountant, but even I could see something strange immediately. There were thousands of dollars listed under something called community maintenance expenses, but the neighborhood barely had any shared spaces. No pool, no gym, no playground. So what exactly were they maintaining? I kept scrolling through the document. That's when I noticed something else. One of the payments was listed as $8,500 for landscaping services. That would make sense, except for one thing. The landscaping company listed on the report had the same last name as the HOA president. At first, I thought maybe it was just a coincidence, but curiosity got the better of me. So I looked up the company online, and within a few minutes, I found something interesting. The landscaping company was owned by the HOA president's brother. Now things were starting to make sense, but it got even stranger. There were multiple payments made to that same company throughout the year. $8,500, $6,200, $9,100. Altogether, the HOA had paid that company over $30,000. And yet, I had never once seen landscapers working in the neighborhood. No trucks, no workers, nothing. So I started digging deeper. Later that evening, I walked around the neighborhood again and talked to a few neighbors. I asked them a simple question. "Have you ever seen landscaping crews working here?" Every single person gave the same answer. No. That's when the neighbor who sent me the email told me something even more shocking. Apparently, he had asked the HOA about the landscaping expenses before, and they refused to give him details. They simply said the expenses were confidential board matters. Confidential? That didn't sound right. HOA funds come from homeowner fees, which means homeowners should be able to see how the money is being spent. And suddenly everything started making sense. The constant fines, the strict enforcement, the aggressive rulebook. What if the HOA wasn't just enforcing rules? What if they were trying to collect as much money as possible? Because if the HOA board was controlling the money, then they were also controlling where that money went. And if those landscaping payments were fake, then someone might be stealing from the entire neighborhood. The more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. So I decided to do something risky. I emailed the HOA board again, but this time I didn't mention the fines. I didn't mention the rule violations. Instead, I asked a very simple question. I requested detailed records of the landscaping expenses. Within 2 hours, I received a reply from the HOA president, but instead of the documents I requested, the email said something else, something that made my stomach drop. It read, "Your continued harassment of the HOA board will result in legal action." Legal action? For asking about where our money was going? That's when I realized something. The HOA board wasn't just annoyed with me anymore. They were panicking. And the next morning, I woke up to find another letter from the HOA taped to my front door. But this time it wasn't a fine. It was something much worse. And when I read it, I realized the HOA had just declared war. The letter taped to my front door wasn't a fine. It was something far more serious. At the top of the page, in bold letters, it said, "Notice of legal violation." According to the HOA, I was now being accused of harassment of the HOA board. Harassment. All because I asked where the neighborhood money was going. But that wasn't even the worst part. At the bottom of the letter, there was a warning. If I continued to interfere with HOA operations, they would pursue legal action against me. I stood there on my porch reading the letter 3 times. It felt surreal. Just a few weeks ago, I was dealing with a ridiculous $50 trash bin fine. Now the HOA was threatening to take me to court. For a moment, I actually considered backing down. Maybe it wasn't worth the stress. Maybe I should just ignore the whole thing. But then I remembered something. The $30,000 landscaping payments. Money that supposedly came from all the homeowners. Money that might not have been used for landscaping at all. So instead of backing down, I did the opposite. That evening, I posted the financial report and the landscaping payments in the neighborhood's community Facebook group. Within minutes, people started commenting. At first, most of them were confused. What is this? Is this real? Why are we paying for landscaping? But then one comment changed everything. A neighbor named David wrote, "Wait, that landscaping company is owned by the HOA president's brother." Suddenly the comment section exploded. People started asking questions. A lot of questions. How much money has the HOA paid them? Why didn't anyone tell us about this? Where exactly was the landscaping done? Within an hour, the post had over 80 comments, and most of them were from angry homeowners. Then something unexpected happened. Another neighbor replied to the post with a photo. It was a picture of a truck parked outside the HOA president's house. The truck had a logo on the side, the same logo from the landscaping company listed in the HOA financial report. But here's the strange part. The truck wasn't working in the neighborhood. It was working on the HOA president's private yard. And suddenly it looked like the HOA board might have been doing something far worse than unfair fines. It looked like they might have been using HOA money for personal work. At that point, the comments in the group started turning into something else. People weren't just angry anymore. They were demanding answers. Someone suggested calling for a special HOA meeting. Another person suggested requesting a financial audit. Within a few hours, dozens of homeowners were involved. And for the first time, the HOA board was no longer in control of the situation. The neighborhood was. Later that night, I checked the Facebook group again. My original post now had over 200 comments. But one new comment caught my attention. It was from someone I had never seen before. The profile name was just former HOA treasurer. And the comment said something that made my heart race. If the current board is doing what I think they're doing, this could be much bigger than landscaping. A few minutes later, that same person sent me a private message. Inside the message was a sentence that changed everything. He wrote, "I used to manage the HOA finances, and there's something you need to know." And when I read the documents he sent me, I realized the HOA board wasn't just hiding money. They had been hiding something for years, something that could get them removed and possibly arrested. But before I could even respond, I heard a loud knock on my door. It was almost midnight, and when I looked through the window, I saw 3 members of the HOA board standing on my porch, and they did not look happy. It was almost midnight, and 3 members of the HOA board were standing on my porch. The HOA president was in the middle, with the vice president and another board member beside him. None of them looked happy. I opened the door slowly. "What's going on?" I asked. The president didn't waste any time. "You need to delete that post from the neighborhood." "Facebook group," he said immediately. His voice was tense. Behind him, the vice president crossed her arms. "You've caused enough chaos in the neighborhood," she added. I almost laughed. Chaos? All I had done was show people the HOA's own financial report. "People deserve to know where their money is going," I replied. The president's face turned red. "You're spreading misinformation," he said. But here's the thing. He never actually explained what was wrong with the information. And that told me everything I needed to know. "I'm not deleting anything," I said. For a few seconds, no one said a word. Then the president leaned closer and lowered his voice. "You have no idea what you're getting involved in," he said. That sentence stuck with me, because by that point, I was starting to get a pretty good idea. After they left, I went back inside and opened the message from the former HOA treasurer again. Attached to the message were several files, bank statements, payment logs, and meeting notes from previous years. At first, the documents were confusing, but the more I looked through them, the clearer the pattern became. For years, the HOA board had been approving payments to a small group of companies, landscaping, maintenance, consulting services, but many of those companies had something in common. They were owned by friends or family members of the HOA board, and the payments weren't small. Some years the HOA had spent over $60,000 on these services, money that came directly from the homeowners' fees. And according to the former treasurer, most of those services were never actually performed. In other words, the HOA board had been quietly draining the neighborhood's money for years. The next day, the Facebook group was even more chaotic. People were furious. Dozens of homeowners demanded answers, and within 24 hours, someone officially requested a special HOA meeting. This meeting was going to be very different from the last one, because this time, almost the entire neighborhood showed up. The clubhouse was packed. Homeowners filled every chair and stood along the walls. The HOA board sat at the front table, looking more uncomfortable than I had ever seen them. The president tried to start the meeting like normal, but it didn't work. People immediately started asking questions. Where did the landscaping money go? Why were payments made to your brother's company? Why weren't homeowners informed? The board members tried to dodge the questions, but the more they talked, the worse it looked. Then one homeowner stood up and held up printed copies of the financial documents. "Explain these," he said. The room went silent. For the first time since this entire situation started, the HOA president didn't have an answer. And that's when something unexpected happened. A man in the back of the room stepped forward. He introduced himself. He was a local attorney who also lived in the neighborhood, and he said something that made the entire room gasp. "If these financial records are accurate," he said, "then this HOA board may have committed financial fraud." The room erupted. People started talking all at once. The board members looked completely panicked. Within a week, the situation escalated even further. A formal complaint was filed. An audit was requested, and by the end of the month, 3 members of the HOA board resigned, including the president. Eventually, a new board was elected. One of their first decisions was to completely review the HOA finances from the past several years. And the funniest part of the whole situation? The very first rule the new HOA board removed from the rulebook was the one about how far your car could be parked from the sidewalk in your own driveway. The same rule that started this entire mess. So in the end, the HOA that tried to fine me $500 for my driveway ended up exposing years of corruption, all because I decided to read the rulebook and follow it exactly. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy these stories.